Armanino's webinar, Equity Administration Software Selection Tips. I'm Kathy Hawkins, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we have a chance to introduce our presenters, let's take a look at a few housekeeping details. If you would please click on the orange arrow to expand your webinar pane. That will give you an opportunity to enter questions for both of our presenters. We will address those as time permits during the session and definitely at the end. Secondly, if you would please make the best audio selection for sound. If you're using a telephone, please make that selection on your webinar pane. Or if you're using the microphone and speakers from your computer, please make that selection. And finally, to qualify for California CE, you must use a personal computer, no PDAs, and log in with your own information and unique URL. Be logged into our online software for at least 50 consecutive minutes within the scheduled time frame of the webinar. Actively respond to at least 75% of the polling questions, and complete the evaluation survey at the end of the webinar. Now let's have a chance to meet our presenters. Scott Schimberg is joining us today. He's a Director of Consulting here at Armanino. He has more than 20 years of financial, executive, and operations experience in both public and privately held companies. Scott also sells cloud-based software. Thanks for joining us today, Scott.
Thank you.
And also joining us is Scott Schwartz. He is a Manager of Consulting here at Armanino. He has worked in the legal and financial industries, providing financial and consulting services to both public and private companies as well as entrepreneurs. And Scott sells and implements equity software solutions. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning.
All right, before we turn it over to them, let's take a quick look at our learning objectives for today. We're going to have an opportunity to calculate the total cost of an equity plan. We're going to analyze who should influence the software decision in terms of the selection process. We're going to take a look at timing in terms of when is the good time for an equity administration software investment. And finally, we're going to take a look at some of the key criteria to consider when making the selection process itself. So, our order in terms of how we're going to cover these things includes starting with the cost of your equity plan. We're going to do a bit of a self-assessment, and we'll provide 6 questions for you to answer to make your determination. And then we'll take a look at making the decision. And we'll include what it takes for the stakeholders, timing and process, as well as the software requirements. So with that, we're going to get started with a very first polling question. Just a reminder that you want to participate by responding to at least 75% of the polling questions. And our first one is, equity is one of the least scrutinized areas during financial statement or SEC audits. True, false, or not sure? All right, we see the votes coming in. Thank you very much. We'll leave the polls open so that the majority of you can vote. We certainly want to have an opportunity to provide CE as long as you meet the requirements. So let's go ahead and close the polls and see what everyone said. And I'm going to turn it over to one of the Scotts.
Yeah, so it looks like 82% saying false, and it is indeed false. This has become more and more scrutinized lately, but it has always been a highly scrutinized area. Your auditors are going to look at it in detail. There's a lot of variables that go into it. It's one of those things where companies argue, oh, it's a non-cash item. You know, it's not detrimental to my financials or important to my financials, but it's one of those areas in accounting that has a lot of complexity and therefore gets a lot of scrutiny. On the SEC side, they're looking at compensation for, your key executives as well as the ASC 718 stock-based compensation calculations. Even your board and other public reviewers of financial statements are starting to look at this area more and more, again, because it gets